Welcome, everybody, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. My name is Joe Arpezi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008, and after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content at letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can really help the new Spotify channel grow by leaving a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it. And you can follow me on X for all the latest updates of everything going on CFF. My handle over on X is at UW underscore purple underscore rain. That is spelled REIGN. And I'm going to start off with a couple of announcements here. We are back into the regular season of college fantasy football. I am excited, guys. I cannot wait for the real games, the games that count in fantasy, to start going here this week. And to let you know what you can expect each week now at letpurplerain.com, this is what you'll see from my weekly content schedule. Monday mornings, I'm going to be releasing my waiver wire target article. Tuesday mornings, I'll be releasing player rankings for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Thursday mornings is the Start Em podcast show, which you are watching right now. And then something brand new that I'm doing this year, early Saturday mornings, I'm going to be releasing a player prop spotlight article. That's where I'm going to go through and review some player props that I like for the Saturday slate. So I'll give you something that you can kind of go through and read while you're watching Game Day, Big Noon Saturday, all the preview shows that are going on. Premium subscribers get full access to all of this content that I'm going to be releasing every week. And if you're not a premium subscriber, you're not sure if you want to sign up for a monthly or an annual subscription, that's fine. I have brought back the 7-day free trial. So you can sign up, get an entire week for free, be able to see if you like the full content, if you think that what I'm putting out there is worth it, and give it a test drive before you make any decision to subscribe to the website. Going over the contents for today's shows, and it is plural. YouTube and Spotify will be the home of my start sit suggestions for the week. And then letpurplerain.com will be the exclusive home where I answer your submitted questions and help you create the best lineup possible. Now that I got that out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. I am just kind of getting myself set up here, guys. Doing this again, it was really fun. The first podcast episodes that I did here on this channel was at the end of last season when I started doing the Start Em Sit-Ems. And, I'm happy to be back in the saddle here for 2025 with this episode. And for those of you that are new to the way that I like to do Start Em Sit-Em, I like to bring up some advanced stats. I like to look at like how many touchdowns allowed does the defense give up for an opponent of a player that I'm going to be talking about. What's the red zone touchdown conversion rate and the third down conversion rate of these defenses? Right now, we don't have those stats. So I'm not going to be able to review them. This will make this show a little bit faster compared to what you can expect moving forward, because I'm not going to have those extra data stats that I can kind of be bringing in. And then one thing that's new to this year is I'm no longer comparing, like for a quarterback, where their team ranks in terms of like fantasy passing offenses and where the defense ranks in fantasy passing defenses. I want to try and make things a little simpler, and I'm using this grade scale now. So I'll be giving a fantasy matchup grade. That's the main thing. That's one of two data points that I can really bring up here this week for week one. The other one that I like to always look at is the Vegas lines for each game, and looking at the score that Vegas is projecting for each team. So I'll be going over those items here while I'm reviewing my picks, and I'm going to be doing 3 quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. That's what I'm going to be covering in the main show. And then, like I said, the best thing that I recommend is for all of you that want to submit your questions to me. I put out threads on X, Twitter, or on Substack. And each week I will answer 10 submitted questions. I want to try and mix up the people whose questions are getting on the show. Even if you submitted a question the week before and I read it on the air, please keep submitting your questions anyways. I'm just going to be trying not to double up too many people, and trying to make sure I can get everybody mixed into the show. But if we're running low on questions and people that weren't on the show previously, I still want I'll still take some of you returning people that I had on the show last week. So that's why I say, go ahead, submit those questions. Once I know I have enough questions that I can lock up those chats, I'll just kind of tell you, okay, the questions are full. Send them to me next week in the new thread. So this is one of the things I like doing for all my subscribers, and I definitely would recommend if you're listening right now on Substack, if you're watching on YouTube, um, follow me on X, or if you subscribe, even as a free subscriber on Substack, you will get the messages that I send out when I ask for your start sit submissions here. So I want to just kind of cover all of that before we get going into the show here. And we're going to kick things off with quarterbacks. Um, my first guy that I'm looking at here is Talon Green from Arkansas. He's taking on an FCS opponent, and Vegas is calling for Arkansas to put up 51.5 points. I grade out Green's fantasy matchup as a B plus. I see this as a very easy stardom. These are the game. If you drafted Talon Green, these are the games that you drafted him for. He needs to be in your lineup for pretty much every non-conference matchup. So this is kind of an easy one to get us going here. But Talon Green is a definite stardom. One of my darlings from best ball leagues that I got a lot of shares of is Cedric Bailey out of NC State. They're taking on East Carolina. Vegas is projecting NC State to score 37.5 points, and I'm giving Bailey an A minus for fantasy matchup grade. I think this is going to be a good one. North Carolina is going to be able to. North Carolina State, excuse me. Uh, North Carolina State is going to be able to score, but this isn't going to be some big blowout game where Bailey's pulled late third quarter, early fourth quarter. Bailey's going to have to play this whole game. Excuse me, guys. Give me a minute here. Been battling some cotton throat today, and it just snuck up on me good. I was saying, Cedric Bailey, he's a guy that he's going to be able to have his way. That they have the better talent than ECU. They're going to score over 35 points, so I like that. Obviously that fantasy matchup's really high. But the fact when you can get a full game out of someone where they do have a distinct talent advantage, that's a must for a stardom pick. So Cedric Bailey out of NC State is my second quarterback, and I'm giving him a stardom. Matthew Sluka, James Madison. Excuse me, guys. Matthew Sluka, James Madison is my last quarterback I'm going to review here. And he's taken on an FCS foe. Vegas has James Madison scoring 40.5 points. And I'm just going to say in general, the James Madison quarterback, a B plus grade for this fantasy matchup. I'm coming out here and saying if you drafted Matthew Sluka, sit him. My hunch is that Barnett, who has been cleared to play in the game, I think both of these guys are going to get reps. I would not be surprised if Sluka's taking, 2 out of every 3 drives, 3 out of every 4 drives, something like that, because maybe they don't want to rush Barnett too quickly. They don't have to in this game. I wouldn't be surprised, Sluka's not going to get. I wouldn't be surprised if Sluka plays 2.5 quarters. Now, that might be enough that he can do some fantasy damage, but there's a lot of just unknowns here. For all we know, Sluka could go out, throw a couple interceptions. Barnett could go out on fire, and Sluka never returns to the game, and it's Barnett's job the rest of the year. I think there's too much to risk here. And one thing I really believe in the early weeks of fantasy, college fantasy football, is to play it safe. Go for safe floor plays. Don't take unnecessary risk with your lineup. Let everybody else do that. Let everybody else over speculate, take on too much risk, and that's how you get your head-to-head wins, especially early in the season, and you always want to start the year hot. So Sluka's one of those, just too many question marks. I don't think it's worth the risk for you guys. So Matthew Sluka, James Madison, my recommendation is sit him. All right, we're going to switch over to running backs now. And I'm going to start things off with Katron Allen from Penn State. They are taking on Nevada. Vegas really likes Penn State in this one. They're projecting them to score 51.5 points. And for a fantasy matchup grade, I'm giving this an A minus for the Penn State running backs. And I love Katron Allen. Some of these really high performing running back twos. You see them out of programs like Penn State. You'll see it out of Louisville. These are games that are great for these guys. They are going to be really solid floor guys because they're not going to risk the starters. So Singleton, he's going to get his action, probably score 2 quick touchdowns. They'll pull him out of the game and let Katron Allen eat from there. So I really love, the matchup. They're going to overpower Nevada. That's why Vegas is expecting them to score over 50 points. And Katron Allen's going to get a pretty decent workload, maybe one of his bigger workloads in the year. So Katron Allen, Penn State, start 'em. Next, I'm going to move over to Jacoby Williams from Texas Tech. They are taking on an FCS team, and Vegas did not, at the time I was pulling everything together, Vegas had not put together a line for this game. I'm giving the fantasy matchup an A minus for this one as well, but I'm recommending that you sit Williams this week. I believe that you're going to see split backfield this game. There's no reason to. I believe Williams was dealing with a little bit of an injury toward the end of camp. Nothing too serious, but there's no reason for them to really ride him hard this week. And this is another one of those. There's a lot of speculation. We don't know how the carries are going to get distributed between this Texas Tech backfield. So I think the safest thing to do if you picked up Jacoby Williams is leave him on the bench. Let's see how those carries get divided out. And you might even need to leave him on the bench for another week when they play a FBS opponent to really get a feel for what you can expect from him. So Jacoby Williams, Texas Tech, sit him. My last running back here, and you're going to hear a similar theme, Wayshawn Parker from Utah. They are taking on UCLA, and Vegas is calling for Utah to score 28.5 points. I'm giving this a B fantasy matchup grade. It's not bad. It's not terrible. I prefer B plus as an up, but it's not the best matchup here. And this is another situation at Utah where we heard talk of this backfield being a split carry backfield in fall camp. That does scare me. The one good thing here is that with Utah playing a quality Big Ten opponent here with UCLA, we're going to know how that carry distribution is going to look for the rest of the year from watching this game. But this is another one of those, don't expect Parker to be the bell cow at Utah. The odds are they're going to split carries somehow, and it's just best to leave Parker on the bench. Don't take that unnecessary risk. So Wayshawn Parker, Utah, sit him. Moving over to wide receivers now. We've got Chris Dawn from Texas Tech. They are taking on Eastern Michigan, and Vegas is calling for Texas Tech to score 36 points. I love this fantasy matchup. I gave it a B plus grade, and I'm really liking. You could say it with Bo Sparks as well, but I just picked Chris Dawn. Both guys fit this breakdown, though. I like this offense to look really good. Eastern Michigan, they'll be able to beat them handily, but it's not going to be a blowout where the starters are pulled. They're going to play a significant amount of time, so I love that part of this matchup. And I just see Texas Tech having its way with this Eastern Michigan defense. So Chris Dawn, Texas Tech, start 'em. Easton Messer, Florida Atlantic. They are taking on Maryland, and Vegas is calling for FAU to score 22.5 points. I'm giving this a B minus for fantasy matchup grade, and this is kind of a wishy-washy answer. I'm going to take a sip of water here before I go into it. It's a little bit of a wishy-washy answer for you guys. If you are desperate for wide receivers, if you don't have a very good bench, if you're in a really deep league, I would say go ahead and play him, hoping he can get and if you're in a PPR league, he might be able to get those garbage time receptions, squeak out 15 fantasy points. But if you have viable options on your bench, then I'm going to recommend that you sit Messer. There's a talent mismatch in this game. The one thing that is nice, like I mentioned, there's that possibility of garbage points, and FAU is going to be playing from behind. So they're going to be throwing it like crazy. But at the same time, they might pull Messer in this game as well. And you might miss out on that garbage time because they don't want to hurt their biggest star on offense. So there's possibilities that could hurt him here. So that's why I'm going to say, unless you met one of those kind of special criterias, I'm going to say Easton Messer, Florida Atlantic, sit 'em. And another one here, Pafole Ashlock, Hawaii. Uh, Vegas is calling on Hawaii to put up 17 and a half points against Arizona. Um, I wasn't overly impressed with the Hawaii offense when I watched them in week 0 against Stanford. I'm still giving the fantasy matchup a B minus grade, but I don't have high hopes for Hawaii on this one. Ashlock will still be able to get his receptions in, but he's not get like they're just throwing a lot of these 1 yard arrow out routes to him. I don't see him getting a ton of yardage, and with only 2 touchdowns that Hawaii's going to score in the game, you're taking a big risk hoping that he scores half of the team's touchdowns. I just really don't like the projected score here. At least Easton Messer, Vegas was calling for FAU to score 3 touchdowns in that one. I would not be surprised if Hawaii scores 1 touchdown and a bunch of field goals. So I'm going to say here, play it safe. I'm not a big fan of this matchup, and especially coming off a big win like Hawaii had. I'm going to say Pafole Ashlock, Hawaii, sit 'em. Now, our last players, the tight ends. I'm going to go with RJ Maryland from SMU. They are taking on an FCS opponent, and Vegas is calling on SMU to score 55 and a half points. This is a very easy B plus fantasy matchup grade. I love this whole setup. There's people might have concerns about RJ Maryland, his health, how much they're going to use him. He has all the reports from fall camp have been great. I think he's fully healthy, 100% ready to rock in this one, and I can see him really taking advantage. He might be able to get you all the fantasy points you need in one half. There is that possibility that they pull him in the second half. I think in the fourth quarter he's definitely pulled, but somewhere in that third quarter they may pull him. But I think he can do enough fantasy damage. He's an easy stardom selection this week for RJ Maryland, Southern Miss. My next one, really the next two are kind of pretty similar. We're going to start off with Tradez Green, LSU. They are taking on Clemson. Vegas is calling on LSU to score 26 and a half points, and I've given this fantasy matchup a B plus grade. What I like here, and I've found this to be true with the tight end position more than any other position, is that when you have a really tough competitive game, um, a lot of times that may scare you off of some players, but tight ends just seem to score more fantasy points. So I like to look for these. I give these tough competitive games a bump when I look at tight ends. And with Tradez Green, the one thing, we don't know exactly how many targets he's going to get. There's a lot of weapons in this LSU offense, and I do think he's going to be splitting snaps with Bauer Sharp. But Tradez Green, if he does not get a touchdown in this game, I'm going to be extremely surprised. I can see LSU using him in specific mismatch situations, utilizing his huge size, especially down in the red zone. I can't really tell you how many yards or touchdowns I'm expecting by him, but I mean, I think a touchdown has to be a lock in this game just by the way that they can scheme him up down in the red zone. So it's there's a lot of question marks, and this is one where there's a lot of speculation. And I do think that you're taking on some risk by playing Green before we've seen him play one full game. But I'm still going to give Tradez Green, LSU, a stardom. Last pick here, one of my darlings from fantasy drafts is Jack Endries from Texas. They are taking on Ohio State, and Vegas is calling on Texas to only score 22 and a half points. For a fantasy matchup, I gave this a B minus grade for Texas in the tight end position. This is another one where there's a lot of question marks. We don't really know how the targets are going to get distributed between all of these Texas pass catchers. This is going to be Arch Manning's first tough competitive game. One thing we have seen from Texas in the past is that the tight end does tend to get targeted in the red zone in these tough competitive matchups. So that is one thing I do like for Endries here, but we just don't know with this year's crop of pass catchers. Like, are they just going to throw up jump balls to Moore? Are they going to, scheme up Endries? Are they just going to try and run it in? Is Arch going to run it in? We don't know the red zone personality of this Texas offense quite yet. And this is definitely a really tough competitive game. Ohio State is a much better defense than Clemson is. So for this last pick, I'm going to say Jack Andrews, Texas, sit 'em, and just play it safe. All right, guys, we are going to wrap up the show here, and this was my selections for this week's Start Em Sit 'em podcast episode. Each week I post on X and Substack where I'm going to ask for your start sit questions. If you want help with your lineups, please join in that discussion and submit your questions to me. I'm about to, you can jump over to letpurplerain.com where I will answer this week's questions. I have a link in the description of this show so you can go over and you can find that. You've been listening to Start 'em Sit 'em. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for joining the Let Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF Rain starts here.